Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garima Talwar and I fondly go by Shiv's niece in these circles. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce you to my fellow panelists and sort of provide my own remarks to begin with, and then go through with the other remarks from my colleagues, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A afterwards. So to my direct left is a good friend of mine, Gurinder Manku, and then following Gurinder we have Anisa Sheikh, another really good friend of ours. Then we have Mila Ilhanto, a great friend of ours as well, and Sean Solanki, who, for those of us that were here last year, mesmerized the audience during the youth panel last year, and so we're really lucky to have him back again. So to start, I wanted to first introduce the question that the panelists have been asked. And the question is quite simply, how do you, in a world whose politics and mainstream media seem to be based on a foundation of inciting divisiveness, navigate and practice a worldview of unity and diversity? Might seem simple enough, but we all know that the task at hand is far greater than any one of us alone. So with that, I'll first turn it over to Gurinder and then go down.
Thanks for the introduction, Garima. It's a pleasure to be here today. Now, when I first heard the question, how do you, in a world that is divided with politics through mainstream media, how do you practice a worldview of unity in diversity? I thought the question was a little bit loaded, right? Because it presumes that our world politics and the mainstream media is indeed divisiveness. But if you think about it, it makes sense, right? If you think about world politics as a political system that's designed and deployed globally to bring order to chaos, we've got the party system. I'm liberal, you're conservative, we can't be friends. These are international borders, this line, there's Canada, there's the US, you cannot cross this line, divisiveness. There are ideologies, democracy, if you're a communist, you don't belong here. So our political system is indeed designed on the premise of divisiveness. Now, how does media fold into all of this? If by media we mean magazines, televised broadcasting, and social media, I'd say that indeed the media has a very pervasive involvement in how world politics plays a factor. A prime example is Trump's shenanigans, right? So we have a racist bigot who is supported by mass media coverage. I have yet to see a major media outlet say, no, wait a minute, Mr. Trump, this is crazy racism, we're not gonna cover this, we're not gonna send your message to the world. No, instead they're covering it even more. This is becoming a new sensation. People that are spreading peace and love does not get covered by the media. I don't see it. I've never seen it. So together, whether by design or by mistake, politics and media has created a system that divides us all. Now, it's important to critically understand what a system actually is, right? A system is a framework that takes a bunch of factors, external factors, and produces a controlled outcome. Our healthcare system is designed to take sick people and make them healthy. Our filtration systems are designed to turn dirty water into clean water. Transportation systems are designed to take people from point A to point B. Our political system is supposed to be designed to turn ideas, go through this process, and convert it into actionable items that further our country. But somewhere along the way, we've lost our way. So Garima's question is, how do you practice a world vision of unity in diversity there is a lot of literature written by people much smarter and more qualified than myself. But despite its existence, we're still all divided. To me, the issue is more symptomatic of something far more rudimentary and far more fundamental to us as human beings. It's far more fundamental to our way of life, and that is education. Education is a powerful, powerful tool. With the right education and the appropriate stimuli, we can create doctors, we can create terrorists, we can create poets, we can create chemists, we can create anything, the list goes on. Education has an immediate, a near-term, and long-term ramification, not in our immediate communities, but all over the world. It starts at a very young age. From a very young age, I can recall that everything I am taught is all about divisiveness. I have not been taught about inclusiveness. It starts at home. For example, when I was younger, the languages taught to me were Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, so Indian languages, despite the fact that I'm born and raised in this country. I can remember conversations amongst older people in my family about religion. So I'm taught about the Sikh religion, and you're taught that Sikh religion is the best and all the other religions won't get you anywhere and all the other religions are bad. And there's also the race part. So I can recall my grandparents frowning upon the fact that I had white or black friends as a child. A funny story, a friend of mine would deliberately invite over our black friend Chad, and what his grandmother would do would take off her jewelry, lock it in her room because they are convinced that black people are criminals, right? And this is what we're taught at a young age, right? So you immigrate to this country, this is how you raise your children, but then you say white people are racist. To me, that makes no sense, but to me, that's also part of the education system, right? Education is at home, and education is also in the schooling system. The education that you get at home is far more pervasive than any education you'll get in an institution because it sticks with you forever. Because these stories still stick with me today. I can't tell you what I learned in Economics 101 in university, but I can certainly tell you about these conversations that I remember as a child. And as you grow older, that divisiveness sticks with you. If you are taught at a young age that all your friends can only be friends that have the same color skin as you, then you are only surrounded by those limited people. And 90% of my immediate circle today, by no fault of my own, subconsciously, they are people of brown colored skin. I have 2 white friends and maybe 1 black friend, everyone else is brown. Why? Because from a very young age I was taught this, and now subconsciously this is the situation that I live in. I think it needs to start at a very young age. I'll give you an example. So my uncle was over for dinner last night. We were talking, the conversation kind of ended up where he said something like, because I'm Indian. And I said, wait, no you're not, you're Canadian. And he said, no, I'm Indian. So I said, well, where were you born? He said, Kuwait. So I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So you're born in Kuwait, you live in Canada, your passport says you're Canadian, but you're convinced you're an Indian. This is symptomatic of a very serious problem because his entire life he's been taught that he's an Indian but there's not. Like, there's no technical way that you can prove to me that he's an Indian because he's not. But he believes this with complete conviction because that is the way he was raised. A colleague of mine at work, Brian, from my London office, was in Toronto for a week. We're doing introductions. He says to me, so where are you from? Now, I know where he's going with this question. I know what he's actually looking for here, but me being the smartass I am, I say, I'm from Toronto. And he says, no, originally where are you from? I'm a man of science and precision, so I say, origination must mean when I was born. So I was born in a hospital in Brampton, so I say I'm from Brampton originally. He's like, no. Back home, where are you from back home? And I know where he's going with this, So I just fast forward the conversation and I say I'm from Africa, right? Because science today tells us that human beings, humanity started in Africa. He got frustrated and walked away to say that. So I think it's important to educate people, right? Education is a really, really powerful tool, and we need to use education both in our schooling system and at home to inform young people about what it means to be diverse. But before you teach them anything else, I think fundamentally we must teach that we are human beings. You must teach that humanity is what binds us all. It is not our religion, caste, creed, color, ethnicity, nationality, or job. It is humanity. And that is severely lacking in our communities, in our country, in the world. And we can see it. There's plenty of evidence of it. If there's a message that I would like everyone to take from here, it is that. Because a few generations from now, we in this room will not be here, but our work will survive. Our legacy will be inciting this spirit of inclusiveness, a spirit where we only believe in humanity and we don't believe in color, caste, creed, religion. We use color, caste, creed, culture, all that as tools to guide us to where we want to be, but the fundamental component that binds us all is indeed our humanity. And had Brian been educated in that way, he would have asked me where I'm from, I would have said Toronto, case closed, right? There would be no further inquiries. But that's not where we are today. I think that if we start now and we include this in our formal schooling system, if we include this in the way we raise our children, to believe that humanity is what binds us all, I think that's the starting point for unity in diversity.
Thanks, Gurinder, that was great. Before I move forward, I did not do each individual bio to begin with because I didn't want to set their stage and set preconceived notions of who they are. So I'll do so after they speak. So as Gurinder alluded to, Gurinder was born and raised in Canada and spent 4 years of his childhood in India and in the UK. He studied economics and political science at the University of Waterloo and has always had an interest in philosophy. His dream job is to be a professor of philosophy and aspires to realize this dream before he is 50. Today, he is a manager in PwC's transfer pricing practice and specializes in financial transactions. Gurinder's motto is that you are never the smartest person in the room. Learn from those ahead of you, hold on to those beside you, and guide those behind you. Thanks, Gurinder.
Hi, my name's Anissa, so I'll just get into it. So Gurinder kind of took over a lot of my topics. Okay, so when Garima had asked me this question, the only one word that came into my mind was having similarities between everyone. Everyone is similar in some way or has some form of commodities between each other that you can share. But what people don't do, or what people need to do, is they need to look at each other and to see what they have in common rather than find what's different about each other. Like, you know, me and Gurinder, for example, like, we could be like, we're from the same culture, but it doesn't always have to be culture, but then if it was someone else, it would be like, oh, he's at a much higher position than me. With regards to mainstream media, with mainstream media that's out there, there's a silo point of view what decisive really means. They're often influenced, like Gurinder said, about political parties' influence and the right and left wing point of view. So the right wing, which is the more conservative, whereas the left is where it leads toward the more liberal. Last year, a few years ago, when there was the attack in Paris, with the Charlie Hebdo newspaper, a few days after, a colleague of mine came to me So my background is I am Muslim. So he came to me and he goes, "What's wrong with you people?" So basically he's saying that, I was kind of involved with that. And I'm like, "What do you mean you people?" He's like, "Yeah, they're your people. You believe in the same beliefs." I was like, "No, that's not true." But obviously the conversation ended short because we were at work. So although, there's two aspects. One is he looked at some media and he just assumed that, they're all the same. So one of the biggest things that in US and UK is what kind of media you're looking at. In US, the television media is very right and left wing. You either have very, very conservatives. For example, you have Fox, which is more of a right-wing news, whereas you have BBC News, it's a bit more central to the left. I mean, everyone has their choice of who they want to look at, who they want to listen to, but you also need to account for the source of where your information is coming from, who the drivers are behind that. So back to my colleague. So there was that aspect of the source of where he got his information. Following that, it was also ignorance. So although everyone says, hey, we're open-minded, he was ignorant in the sense that he didn't educate himself. He himself is Pan-Asian, but he never took account for the fact is like, A, you can't assume and you can't be ignorant without, realizing just because me and him, the person who, the individual who performed the attacks, have Arabic names that, they're my people. Those things make a huge, huge difference, I would consider. Another aspect is that at least in our friends group and other groups, even older, younger crowd, people have lost about having an honest debate. Honest debate where they will go into a debate with assumptions and their opinions, but they're not open to understand other individuals' opinions. If you don't open yourself to not to be ignorant and open your mind to listen to others, you're not having an honest debate. And I think these few things, and I know Gerther covered a lot about the political aspect, which I won't get into, but it does impact how unity comes informed with diversity. That's what I think.
All right, and now to say a few words about who Anissa is after she's spoken. Anissa works in financial services where her area of focus is asset management. In her addition to her daily job, she is also involved with a nonprofit organization where she educates and influences financial professionals to become future leaders. She is also my counterpoint, my colleague on an organization called Counterpoint, where we work with victims of domestic abuse. Our next speaker is Neela.
Hi everyone. When I was actually asked to be a panelist, I was quite scared, to be completely honest. I'm not the greatest at public speaking. I still get very anxious, even though I've forced myself to do many public speaking events to get over my fear. It still gets to me. So it doesn't get any easier, but I thought this was a good exercise to kind of express my thoughts and start an open dialogue with others and share our own individual experiences. So like I mentioned, my name is Neela. I was born in Indonesia, and I came to Canada at the tender age of 9 with my family. Even at a very young age, I really did love to indulge myself in inquiry and self-reflection. I was very shy and reserved, and I spent many hours by myself thinking, observing, and playing. So I'm just going to tell you a series of stories, and perhaps it has no relation to one another, but at the end I hope to answer the main question, which is how do I navigate and practice a world of view of unity and diversity. So I just want to tell you one particular story. When I was little, I used to love puzzles, and I also had a lot of books that I read. So at the age of 4, I can remember constantly staring at one particular owl in the middle of my picture book. And I've heard, owls howl at night, and I thought of this owl as this wiser, older protector who kept everybody safe at night and oversees the town while everybody was sleeping. So the owl in my mind, from what my parents have told me, had all the characteristics of what God should be like. And genuinely, I felt a deeply rooted connection to this owl in my picture book. I remember asking my family if the owl was God. And they quickly corrected me and said, God is nothing, not something like an animal or a person. God is almighty and is a presence that you can't physically touch. So the owl you can touch, so they can't be God. So as a very stubborn child, I remember being very upset about them not being able to validate my reality, and for me, not even to be able to explain why I felt the way I did. So I felt I was convinced this owl was God and nobody was going to tell me otherwise. And so I stood hard for but what I believed in, and for a couple of days, and then eventually I put the picture book down and came to follow the reality and teachings of my family. So all in all, this whole story about the owl and me thinking it was God, the purpose of me telling the story was that like many others, I come from a history of familial and environmental teachings. And I must tell you that living a life of neutrality to work against the push of politics and mainstream media, in my own belief, to foster this sense of more so humanhood that is anti-oppressive towards race, gender orientation, socioeconomic, cultural, and religious beliefs. It's not something that is very easy. It's something that I have to work on every day. It takes a lot of unlearning and really educating and immersing myself in other people's lives. And to add to that, I feel that I'm still navigating the borders of my own identity, being an immigrant when I came here when I was 9. So I think we all have to go about it really thinking that we all have our own intrinsic injustices that we feel ourselves, and or maybe that we impose on others, that we need to work hard and iron out every day. I don't know about you guys, but that's just how I feel. But for me, I think the acknowledgement piece is really important, that to say that the acknowledgement that there are inequities in our society, right? That it's an important step towards moving forward. So that acknowledgement piece that we're still living against the backdrop of inequities in race, gender, and socioeconomic status, that there is still rampant underrepresentation or misrepresentation of, Black, Muslim, LGBTQ+, Aboriginal communities in our society. And yes, patriarchal, imperialistic views are broadcasted in mainstream media, and that's a very harsh reality to kind of come to terms with and to acknowledge, but I think we do need to acknowledge that. So we think to ourselves that, no matter where you are in the world, I think we should think that to ourselves, like, somebody somewhere out there does not have the liberty or freedom to express themselves as I can, or to have their identity validated or acknowledged. So again, I think that to move forward for me, acknowledgement piece is really important. It took a long time for me to realize that, the distribution of power, money, and resources on a global, national, local level really do matter and affect people every day. So we are constantly bombarded by information, and it's really our duty to sort of take all that information, but not be so consumed by it that we forget to take care of each other, right? So it's a balancing act, really, for me. So I feel like we all have a responsibility to stand up to, for our marginalized communities, to eliminate any kind of social, spatial or political isolation. And at the end of the day, I feel like, I'm human, you're human, and that is all that matters in this space that we are in, right? So again, I feel like we need to work towards all-inclusiveness, and this may be a lifetime of work for each individual person, but it is nonetheless necessary. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings that don't only want to be tolerated, but want to be treated with respect, understanding, and from a place of compassion and not pity. And we all want to feel that worthiness. So I had about 3 years of going off the map, you could say, in my early 20s, where I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think I know who I am anymore. My self-identity and those borders were getting very blurry. And then after 3 years, I just chose to embrace being uneasy and to just focus on loving others and being a humanist. There are always going to be, I think, sentiments about me being a woman, being grown up in a Muslim culture, being of Southeast Asian descent, cultural sentiments like eating with my hands and being with my loud family who show a lot of affection that most people think is too much affection, that will always be a part of me. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the capacity to embrace other ways of life while still being able to celebrate my own upbringing and identity. Because I know that I'm ever changing and I'm never the same twice. So I thought about how I have evolved over the years. When my family and I first moved to Canada at the age of 9, I actually felt that I was a lot more vocal about my culture and my religion at the time, and felt that my peers were much more inquisitive and embracing of me. And as I grew older, I found myself being more conscious to tell which co-workers and acquaintances that I celebrate Eid, or that I'm a Muslim, because I avoided being probed and being asked things like, but you look Asian. To have all the unnecessary inquiry into my past, what I thought about things on the news, and feeling compelled to respond to Islamic extremism and explain why I don't really celebrate all of the stat holidays, and the list goes on. So I actually found it took a lot more courage for me to have an open dialogue with people as I grew older, as I was starting to care about what they thought of me. So this is something that I need to work on every day, to keep an open dialogue going and work towards understanding the insecurities within myself. So I grew up in a university housing community where I interacted with people from all walks of life. I had to work multiple jobs while in university, while my mom worked in a factory to support my dad, my sister, and I while we were in school. And I realized later on that I'm actually very privileged to be living in a safe community, to have the exposure to be able to walk and live amongst peers of different backgrounds, and to embrace them as my own family. And I was privileged to have parents who were very focused on their education as well as their children's. So where I was going with this is really that we all live with privileges and non-privileges. And after contemplating for some time, I actually have this colorful board in my room. I call it my writing therapy board. And it says, the basis of all religious theologies is to work towards certain moral virtues. Number 1 is prudence, the wisdom and knowledge to have, and I put example, wisdom and knowledge to have good judgment. Sometimes this means mind over emotions. Number 2 is justice, to uphold people's rights and welfare, to be impartial and avoid personal prejudice. Number 3 is fortitude, which is the courage and strength to do what is right. And number 4 is temperance, self-restraint and moderation. And I put example, we have to be moderated even in obedience to God, and even to add to that, maybe knowledge seeking. So in the end, I think the main thing for me is moderation, to live, and practice a worldview of unity and diversity. Yeah, so we need to trust in each other and learn to hear about each other's stories of struggle to really understand its importance and precedence. Because sometimes we can, we could even say that we put a lot of emphasis on being rational and have forgotten to look in and trust our intuition. So I will leave you with my favorite quote, and it says that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, the rational mind a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant, but has forgotten the gift. And that's by Albert Einstein. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm notorious for chatting, so I'll set myself a timer. A lot of what I want to share is one of my favorite teachers said, you have to unlearn what you've learned. That's yoga, right? It's amazing how wonderful pain can be as a teacher. And when you come face to face with pain, when you come face to face even with your own self-annihilation, you learn a lot. You'll learn a hell of a lot. This shouldn't be the path people take, unfortunately. It happens. And so out of all of this, I learned a couple things. And the most important one really was that I'm not my mind. There's a light of consciousness that is watching this movie, right? Another one of my favorite teachers, my grandfather, Dada, he said, be a witness to your mind. And I didn't really understand that until I felt like I was, hanging off the proverbial Bodhi tree, saying, why am I here? Why am I here? This doesn't make any sense. And I saw my mind, and I thought, that's not me. And it started the internal dialogue where I actually got face to face with myself, and then I became my absolute favorite teacher. My own very best friend is me, right? So out of all of this, I realized, okay, well, why are we doing this? 4.5 billion years from now, the sun's going to explode, Earth is going to be gone. We really have no chance of escaping this place physically. Like, let's be real. I have a telescope. I've searched the internet. There's nothing around. Nobody gets out of here alive. I promise you that, right? So if we can't leave this joint physically, how else can we make this make sense? And that pointed to something that was non-physical, which is consciousness. And I use analogies a lot. One of my favorites is the movie projector. So our consciousness is like the light that goes through this film, which is like our ego or our mind, and it projects something onto a screen, which is really ultimately an illusion, right? So out of all of this, and my background is science, I'm very logical, I like to be very methodical, but I'm also very spiritual, and they weren't always good friends. I learned 4 laws. So whether you believe in God, great. If you don't believe in God, then I'll substitute that temporarily with energy, right? Because energy is, to a scientist, energy is all pervasive. The cool part about energy is you can't destroy it. Right? The law of conservation of energy says you cannot destroy it. So it transforms into something. Great. So 4 laws I learned. You exist. And what that means is, if you exist, you're part of this energy. If it can't be destroyed, then relax. You have always been here, and in some way you will always be here. Right? Things changed, form, that's fine. Second law. All of this that was created, all of this energy, all of this mass, the universes, the galaxies, all of this that was created wasn't created by a creator. Because if everything is energy and it's all together, then my creator can't be outside of that, right? So if my creator isn't outside of the energy, then maybe my creator's somewhere within this realm of energy. And I learned that all of this, everything that exists, isn't made by a creator, it's made of the creator. It's all the creator. This is it. The third law that I learned was what you put out is what you get back. So this is the projector analogies. The movie that I've selected is what I get to enjoy. If I want to watch a horror movie, I don't know why anybody would, and I've seen a couple. Why would you do that? They enjoy it. We get to enjoy whatever movie we want to put in that night. But we choose the movie. And here's the thing, is we don't really believe we choose the movie because I got educated on this. And this is where, like, the rest, I mean, I feel humbled to be thought of as, like, young in this crowd. I'm not young. I probably belong in that crowd more than I belong in this crowd. Right, so the projector analogy is our consciousness goes through our mind and projects this illusion onto a wall, and we get attached to it. There's this, in Indian or Sanskrit, we call it Maya. There's this attachment, and you almost equate yourself to your world experience, and then the label machine starts, and that's really the beginning of the division, right? And so all of this long story to come back to how do I conduct myself in a world that is governed for divisiveness. Well, that's good business. See, that's the problem, right? All of this drama, the movie that they're playing right now, high profit margin. Like, they make a ton of money. And when I say they, I mean, money and science are like languages. And right now, money is the language that a few select powerful people really love. And for what reason, I don't know, because in 4.5 billion years, it's not gonna matter anyways. Like seriously, Mr. Rothschild, what do you need with $1 trillion? Whatever. So in preparation, and actually, I'm running out of time. All right, I'll get to the really cool part. So I actually wrote the number pi. This is actually sorry, I was gonna just write 141592653. Cut to the chase. The number pi is cool because it's mathematical, it's fun to play with. It's the ratio between the radius, so the center to the outside of a circle, the ratio of that radius to the circle's circumference. And it's the funnest game to play with kids. Like, I couldn't get my kids to even understand stuff, but you take a paper plate and you put a pencil through it and you roll it and you do measurements, and I have 9 kids around my kitchen table. They're like, "Oh, this is cool." What Kevin did here with the paper, that was a classroom. That's the way a classroom should be, right? Kids should, like, a kid that can't sit still at school shouldn't have to. That's what education should be. So teach kids this, boring, and it's it sucks. I wrote that there because the neat part about pi is the numbers go forever and they don't repeat. So now imagine, forget relation to the decimal place or that they even are. Each of those places, don't think of it as a number or a value. Don't even put a value to it, like a 4 is better than a 1. It's a character. And each of us is a character. But you know what? You change one of those numbers, it's not pi anymore. And that's the way creation is. All of this is supposed to work the way it was characterized out. When one of those characters, like me, spends all of its life thinking it should be like somebody else, that I'm not good enough for this person, I'm not good enough for them, my expectations, I'm living up to somebody else's standard. I didn't even know who I was. Because I was never given the space to figure out, okay, well, this is me, let me look in the mirror, let me figure it out, right? The education system, even when I was a kid, said, do this, do that, that's where your value is. That's what your worth is, it's in the marks, it has nothing to do with what you're interested in, we don't care about it. Learn the curriculum, right? And the problem is that we spend our lives, and it becomes a habit, it becomes a routine in the mind, where we don't even take time to look inwards and say, who am I? What's my character? What is my character? And until each of us learns to be who we are, and one of my favorite quotes, right? Stop being who you think you're supposed to be, start being who you are. If we could teach that, teach those 4 laws, teach that to kids from the time they're little, our only job as adults, I guess, and I try to do this with my boys, my only job is to take away the barriers to inclusiveness. So my final thought on this is, if we are all part of this one energy, and it's all one thing, why is there a need for inclusiveness? We're already included. There's and so preaching and practicing and saying, okay, well, let's be, let's focus on inclusiveness. The challenge with that is, if I say, okay, I want to include you, well, the hell gave me the power to do it? Right? It's not up to me to embrace somebody and say, okay, well, you can be part. That's the same power that divides. Right? So actually, I think the push for inclusiveness is actually counterproductive. Right? The push for including people is actually what is destroying all of this, and it won't let it heal. The only way to heal it is to take that mirror and turn it to the person. You don't need to be included. You're already perfect, right? That power to label someone, even the power to label yourself, right? And you know what? This is the coolest part about all of the stuff that I've read. In all of the religions, I try to pick one. And you know what religion I belong to? Fun and play. Right? That's the only one that matters. Because there's no limit to it, right? They all say the same thing, know thyself. What the hell does that mean? Let's spend a weekend focusing on know thyself. And you realize inclusiveness is no disrespect to the people who put this on, but maybe that could be next year's theme, know thyself. Just pitching it out, right? So here it is. What do we do about it on a day-to-day basis? Okay, Sean, be practical. You're the scientist guy. What is the practicality behind all this? What can I do? What I can do is remove barriers to inclusiveness. I can't include somebody, but I can take crap out of their way, even if it means taking them, like their own mental thinking around it, out of their way, right? True lasting inclusiveness is born when you become wholly conscious of your belonging in all of creation, and it's expressed in the gratitude and stillness of mind. Inclusiveness begins with you and ends with you. And if you have to suffer along the way to speed it up, so be it.
Thanks, Sham. So let me just back up for a second, and I'll do Sham's bio, then Neela's, because I was remiss and didn't do that, and then I'll introduce Chris. So very quickly, Sham toiled in cubicles for 17 years. After the anesthesia wore off 2 years ago, he remembered his passion and is now a day trader and an activist for play. He is also an advocate for new approaches to public education and mental health. He spends his time as an avid armchair scientist, exploring the universe of mind, consciousness, quantum physics, and astronomy. He also plays a lot, perhaps a little too much. And now for Neela. Neela completed a BSc and MSc from the University of Guelph, and her area of interest in school was geriatric research. She works for a nonprofit as a care coordinator in the Mississauga-Halton area. Her interests include writing poetry, singing, food, and all things that keep her above else human. I'd now like to introduce our final panelist, Chris Dennis.
Thank you very much, Garima. I apologize for not being ready to speak today, so I'll have to give you folks my bio right now. I was a little underprepared. I wasn't going to speak, but the universe decided to grab me by the arm, by a gentleman there in the back, and pull me in front here. So if I'm a little nervous, please bear with me. I grew up in Europe, son of a military dad for about 10 years, Germany, Belgium, and Italy. And I took philosophy and environmental studies at University of Waterloo, so just a little bit of a background. I have some points today that I was going to put before the audience to answer the question. I wasn't exactly sure myself how to go about answering the question, so I thought I'd put it before us, and I do so by sort of posing two separate solutions to the problem. The first solution being sort of an abstract understanding of oneness in answering the question, how do you, in a world whose politics and mainstream media seem to be based on a foundation of inciting divisiveness, navigate and practice a worldview of unity and diversity, and a more experiential approach involving actual experience of oneness. So I've got some ideas. I thought I'd throw them out there and participate. So the first thing I'd like to say is clearly we have an innate and internal sense of oneness, and there's many experiences that can attest to that. How do we bring that out? There's an abstract way of identifying this. Excuse me, I'm just trying to find where it was in my notes here. Quantum theory, for example, clearly is something that shows at the most basic level of the universe that we're all one, that we're integrated. DNA, various biological theories clearly show that we're all one. We share a lot biologically with flies, for example. We're all related through the tree of life. Neil deGrasse Tyson points out the quite potent example of how we are all forged in the furnace of stars, that the hydrogen that originally existed was pressed together to form the heavier elements that made possible the current world that we live in now. The diversity that exists currently only exists as an emanation of the original unity. So the diversity that we do have now actually was parented by the original unity. So diversity and unity aren't really antithetical to each other, they coexist. And that Neil deGrasse Tyson makes a great point, I think, of talking about. So how do we facilitate this type of awareness of oneness in terms of actual experience? I mean, there's clearly meditation. There's chemical means. Some folks are against the idea of any type of substances that would actually open the mind to that level, but nonetheless that does exist. Interactions with nature clearly are very important, and communal activity. Clearly, us gathering today, folks living with one another as opposed to in isolation, group identity experiences, so shared rituals. This can facilitate oneness. Close relationships, obviously. I'd like to point out that society clearly we're having some issues with society fragmenting in that regard, and there needs to be more of an effort to connect with each other in the face of this disconnection. So maybe saying hello to neighbors, people that we don't know, going to community events, family gatherings, events with friends. Also helping to make ourselves available to have more close relationships with one another. And how we go about doing that, I was going to propose several different ways that would be supporting mental health, supporting less aggressive, less fear-based and anger-based tension in society, eliminating power imbalances and abuse in society at large and within personal circles could also be helpful to facilitate close relationships, which would facilitate a sense of oneness. Things that also facilitate empathy and compassion. So those were my ideas on how to navigate and induce a state of oneness. Again, it would be a stepping stone to propose that folks who aren't in this state could use abstractions to get there, and the more powerful way of getting there would be through actual experience. So it's an honor to be able to speak in front of you folks today, and apologize for my nervousness, and thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and a special thank you to all of our panelists. I was going to say some remarks, but I think in the interest of time, I will save them for next year, if that's okay. And just wanted to open it up to any Q's and A's that folks might have before we move to our break.
It's not my turn, it's our turn. We're here already.
I find it very interesting to listen to all of them, and also very disturbing. I am an immigrant to this country. I came here at 19 years of age.
A little louder.
Do you have a microphone? I don't like to expose myself.
Sorry, stand.
What I'm saying is that I find what all these young people are saying is fascinating, and it's also very disturbing, because as an immigrant to this country at the age of 19, as a white immigrant who didn't grow up speaking English, because I grew up speaking Irish, it was interesting to arrive here to find that, number one, I was being a woman who had to work because our family had lost everything. We were rebuilding ourselves in this country. It wasn't acceptable. And I actually worked for CIBC at the time as a teller, and my first exposure to what today you'd probably say was major prejudice was when a gentleman came up and asked me if I was Irish. I said yes. I was like Catholic or Protestant. I said I was raised as a Catholic, and was I North or South? And I said I came from the south of Ireland. To which he took his deposit book, slammed it, and he said, I'll take my business elsewhere. As a 19-year-old, I had no idea what was going on, nor did I know what I'd done. And besides, I was afraid I was going to lose my job, and my family needed that money at that point in time. So that was the level of discomfort that one experienced as a white female in Canada at that point in time. I had a choice then. I couldn't have gone back to Ireland. But I thought, damn it, I'm going to make myself successful. I became the first female that was ever trained in the management training program with CIBC, and at every single stage, there was nothing but major grief. I mean, absolutely major grief. The strides that I see that have happened in the intervening years are huge. First of all, everything's open to women. I used to work for your organization. I'm retired from the Ministry of Finance. So again, I was the first tax auditor that ever worked when I was the Ministry of Revenue. And it was not a happy position to be in then as a woman, because I was one of the first women to be in that area. What I'm saying to you is that, yeah, I know you're experiencing discomfort on some level. But that is part of being human. And the journey also is to look at those incidents with compassion and find out where are they coming from. What is it that the person at the other end of that stick is so fearful about? What are they afraid of? I can identify that, you know, this of course in a male-dominated society, somebody was afraid that females were going to get ahead, and we did. And I fought for that too, you know? But what I'm saying is, I couldn't hate men because, you know, I have a father, I have 3 brothers, and I now have a son. So had I gone in with that, I really feel that this needs to be changed, and it has to be changed in a negative manner. It wouldn't have happened. And that's what I'm saying to you, is that recognizing the educational level that's now available to everybody, which wasn't when I was first I came to this country. That's now, but that has been done thanks to the work of previous generations. And I think it's really important to honor that contribution. I think it's important to respect where those individuals are. I think it's also important to, through positive action, instead of as I certainly embrace your commentary on inclusiveness, per se. I worked with the Ministry of Finance on a diversity project, and it was literally lip service. I spent a lot of time with a video crew going out and talking to various factions within the Ministry of Finance, and I watched as, well, we had our Secretary of Cabinet, we had our Ministry of Finance, we had a whole ton of representatives from each organization come in, and it was a wonderful day. And what changed? Absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, there was more prejudice than ever, especially in our Oshawa location, because they were doing the lip service piece. So what I'm saying is, in my world, it's not what you say, it's how you behave that affects change. And that's what I would call on young people today to do, is be grateful for where we're at. And I'm talking about all of us. Be grateful for the opportunities that are there. Yes, recognize that there's prejudice. Of course there is. Do I like hearing that all Irish are drunks? That's what I've heard all my life. Was that a truth that I could actually examine and look at? No, because it wasn't my world. But in fairness, if I look at it, yes, some Irish people are drunks. And yes, there are people that are in the streets, both in Dublin and here. And that is the impression that's built up through the leprechauns and the green deer and everything else. So is that an unfair expectation for somebody to think that Irish or all the Irish enjoy themselves by drinking? No, it's not unfair, because that's the portrayal. So what can be changed by that? Or how can we change it? And you change it by setting a different example there. And I could talk all day, and my brother would probably cut me off.
Sister.
Now you understand how. Anyway, thank you very much. It is interesting. The fun aspect. Very good.
Very quick. Yeah, I know that. Yep. Thanks, man. Is there a way that people can send feedback into answers? Like, is there a feedback? Can they send feedback to Shem? Can people somehow send feedback on a topic on the website? Sure. Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask just a question, right? Yeah. I hear the common thread here is, and even in your story about how habits are learned and taught, the real foundational problem here is our education. I mean, start with the education system, but distill it even more is, how do we learn? Where are we learning from? Right? Media, it's so how do we fix the crap and learn how to filter? Okay, this is good, this is good, this is what I want, and learn to become more of our wholeness instead of assuming what other people are telling us is true and just wearing that label because we think Gucci looks cool.
Thank you, Mayor.
One, very quick.
Very quick. Very quick. I felt compelled to respond to what you said and what you said. You said there's an innate sense of oneness. And you said your education somewhere through your grandfather came to you. Let you watch, you be the witness to your consciousness. That is education.
Right. So how do we get kids to learn this?
Wait a minute. First of all, we got to tell kids your grandfather told you,
Right.
be a witness to your consciousness. Awareness is where everything begins.
Right.
And then you take that awareness in, and then you work at it. Okay, that's the next step. If your grandfather did not tell you that this thing,
Right.
you will not have followed it up.
Right, but then,
In spite of the fact that there is an innate sense of oneness in all of us, but we are not aware of it. We don't follow up on it.
but there's a big difference between oneness and conformity. And that's what we're taught, right? We're taught conformity is,
No.
children are, do this, and you're right.
Exactly. That's what this whole thing is about. Let's get out of that mode and let's make people aware of that oneness that we have.
Right.
And then work at it and express it in their own ways.
Teach them what we do. So I don't know if people can find out like how to contact Shed. If we can send an email and then maybe have some kind of
info@spiritualeducation.org.
because we need ideas. Like something's got to change. It's going on for 100 years now. This industrial revolution education. How do we fix this? Right. That's what. Because I'm not very smart.
I think
Just in time.
you got to work at
I
it.
do have, listen, in respect to our U.S. neighbors down there, we've got a New Yorker, and it's provided Bill, because of your New York accent, you got a very quick question?
Yeah, well, actually, it's a question, it really is a question for you guys. I'm in the persuasion business, okay?
He's a lawyer.
Yeah. And a mediator, too.
Mediator, yes.
And a lot of it is in the financial industry, guys. But in any case, I'm listening to a discussion about the challenges experienced by younger people, and for the purposes of this conversation, you guys are younger people. And maybe with differences, being born in different places, having different colored skin, and the struggle to feel included. And here's my question. My fear is that being included is becoming less and less of a priority for people. I am more concerned that people who sit in jury boxes can't even follow what's going on because they're looking at their screens.
Absolutely.
Their relationships are no longer with people. People get in the way of their relationship with the screen. You guys are the first generation who have been raised, I mean, by the time that came along, I was into my 20s and third decade, 30s. Okay, but you guys saw it right through. What role, if any, does technology play in the challenge to feel included or even to want to be included? And I guess that's the question for you guys.
Excellent question.
Yeah, I know.
Listen, first of all, let's thank our panelists here. Wonderful food for thought. I think we've got a topic for a new conference. What the hell's going on here? Anyhow, and by the way, I'd like to thank my sister Mary. She's the brightest in the family, and I could never win a verbal argument with my sister. So the only defense I had was to patronize her. Do you know how many cups of tea have ended in this face? She's Irish, I mean. Anyhow. Anyway, I'd just like to ask, I'd ask Vicky and Sarah to come up and just thank our panelists.
I would just like to say it was very, very inspiring, each and every one of you, and it just gives us so much hope that all of you, all the inspiration that you guys have shared. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, folks. Pleasure. Okay, we're going to take a very quick, we're over time.